Wow,
Yeah.
this is delicious. I love this.
Yeah.
Where can I get more? This is totally different from any coffee I've ever had.
Right. My name is Timen. So I am the founder of Lacàph. We're a Vietnamese coffee brand. Although it's hard, it's coffee. What we've really done is marry the product with storytelling. Without the story, is basically a commodity. It's the story, when you really pull everything aside, it's the story what adds value and creates the brand over the long term.
So why do you think it is that maybe Vietnamese coffee has yet to have this kind of global acceptance that other coffee cultures maybe already have?
Marketing only exists in Vietnam since the economic reforms in 1986.
Wow.
And you can see slowly very high quality brands coming out of Vietnam. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the country to have an impact on every kitchen around the world. And we really, hope that people visit us here and learn, because it's super fun and it's also really delicious.
I want to begin the interview by asking you for a self-introduction. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. So thanks, Alicia, for coming to Lacàph. My name is Timen. So I am the founder of Lacàph. We're a Vietnamese coffee brand based out of Ho Chi Minh City. And I've been here for quite a while, as we just talked about right before, 16 years. I came here when I was quite young. I think, just turned 22. And I worked in several different businesses. My last sort of real job, as I sometimes kind of jokingly say, was at Remy Cointreau, which is a wine and spirits company. I was the head of marketing for the region. At some point, it became much easier for foreigners to do direct investments into Vietnam. Previously, it was difficult. Mostly maximum you could really own was 49%, which was sometimes creating some difficulties in feeling confident in investing. But laws have changed as part of Vietnam's sort of, a step-by-step entry into sort of the WTO program, and therefore Vietnam has slowly opened more and more sectors for foreign investment. And so I started doing that, and I founded several different businesses co-founded rather in furniture and in software and media. But I felt for a long time that something was missing. I wanted to, I was really proud of the businesses that I was involved with, but I realized that none of them had much to do with Vietnam. They were always about bringing foreign brands or foreign ideas to Vietnam. And that is not really what brought me to Vietnam. Vietnam is what brought me to Vietnam. It's the people, it's the culture, it's the beauty of the country itself. And so about 5 years ago, I really realized that I wanted to do something that was about Vietnam. And so I wasn't a coffee expert by any means. In fact, if I drank more than 2 cups, I would get kind of jittery. And so it wasn't necessarily going to be a coffee company at first. But after really looking into various product categories, coffee really spoke to me, because very few countries have this sort of these two elements, where it's both a coffee producing country and a country that has its own unique coffee culture. I mean, even Italy, that has probably the most famous coffee culture in the world, doesn't actually grow its own coffee. They import beans from countries like Vietnam to produce and roast, and they're very good at that. But to live in a country that has a supply chain that's essentially 6 hours from point to point,
wow,
in terms of driving at least, is incredible, right? Most people who enjoy their coffee, it comes from thousands of miles away. So this really drew me to coffee specifically, and that's why I founded Lacàph in early 2020.
Amazing. So you described that you've had, experience working in kind of, it sounds like a more corporate position or more corporate role, doing marketing for larger brands outside of Vietnam. What was kind of the shift like for you of opening your own brand that has so much local vibe and local culture? I mean, you had to create the branding for the products, the space as well. What kind of shift was that like for you?
Yeah, certainly, when you're doing or representing foreign brands, you're going to get a lot more from Central, right? And various environments, various organizations and brands will allow different levels of creative input on domestically, so to speak. So, and adaptations and things like that, and certain brands will allow more for, local adaptations, but also feedback in the sense of, hey, this is not going to work for Vietnam, for instance, and this might work, but we need to change it. So it really does matter a lot what kind of company you work for. But I think the biggest shift really is going indeed from a company where, or an environment where although you can bring a lot to the table domestically, at Rémy Cointreau I was able to do that, to really having to create everything from the ground up. It's a really rewarding experience, but it's at the same time, it's not you should not underestimate how much work that is to really build a brand. And some people take a very organic approach and they're okay with that. Vietnam is a very fast-moving country, though, right? And so my goal is to try to really build out the business more rapidly. Now, COVID did not particularly help in that regard, but overall, we are really investing in this business to try to make it more significant and larger on a shorter time frame, a little bit like Vietnam as a country is.
I see.
Right?
So kind of trying to really jumpstart it a bit, especially
Absolutely.
following COVID.
Yeah.
Now people are coming back to Vietnam as well.
Yeah.
Tourists are coming back, and it's definitely visiting Saigon. It's very lively. The energy is in the air, I feel like.
Sure.
Have you kind of shifted your approach then to your marketing efforts since COVID ended moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the goal of our brand is to be an international Vietnamese coffee brand. So although that Vietnam still is our largest market, I don't see that being the case 5 years from now. I think that international markets will become our biggest, our biggest revenue source, so to speak. So, we are creating, our goal is really to create a brand that Vietnamese people like and appreciate and are proud of. But at the same time, really it is a brand that is consumed by global audiences. So from the get-go, we had that in mind. It wasn't something that developed later. Now, again, COVID did not help because we had to certainly make difficult decisions, in mid and late 2020, from a very sort of ambitious and sort of global vision to a more domestic vision, because we decided at that point we wanted to continue. We're not going to hunker down and sort of bide our time for a few years. We really thought, okay, this is actually an opportunity for us to get ahead and potentially, while our competitors are maybe choosing to sort of lay low, we really tried to use that time to develop our product portfolio. So we spent a great amount of time and resources building out our product portfolio, the quality, making an export-ready proposition for new markets, and so I don't think that our strategy necessarily was affected so much overall, but the order of what things were going to be done, because initially we wanted to, our first step in Lacàph was to make a very basic portfolio and then create experiences for visitors to Vietnam to come and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And so because Vietnam closed its borders in, I believe, April of 2020, that was no longer really possible. So we really had to look, okay, what are we going to then do domestically? And so it was that, trying to find customers domestically and really do our B2B, domestic B2B sales expansion, plus plus product development. That was our focus for the 2.5 years or 2 years that COVID was really affecting things here.
I see. So is this maybe this? I could be wrong here,
Yeah.
but perhaps then this feeds into some of the materials that I saw when I was learning about Lacàph. They include just these gorgeous videos on your YouTube channel that look at the farmers, for example, or culture within Vietnam. Yep. I saw content in Vietnamese, in English, or in Korean. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about what your aim is with that kind of content? I think that that's not something that I usually see from a coffee shop or from a local coffee brand.
Right. So we're definitely ambitious. You know, our vision for the brand is to be the #1 premium Vietnamese coffee brand globally by the end of the decade. But also, and then sort of I don't really like the word premium, but sometimes it's difficult to get around it. It's definitely a more upmarket product that Lacàph, the brand, the product, the quality that we make. So, although that at its heart it's coffee, what we've really done is marry the product, the sort of physical product, with storytelling, and that's something that goes back to when I was working at Remy, and something I learned at Remy Cointreau, and I learned in subsequent endeavors that I did. You know, without storytelling, most things become basically a commodity, right? And commodity products are usually sort of the lowest form of sort of value that you can create, essentially. So, for example, green beans, just by themselves is just a commodity. Green coffee beans, right? But if you can say, oh, where is it exactly from, and tell how it was processed, and what farmer did this, and what is his or her story, or suddenly it adds a lot of value to these green beans, and it's no longer as a commodity, mm-hmm. but it becomes a premium product suddenly, even at just the green bean level, mm-hmm. right? And then if you then go and roast, and you have some sort of mindful approach to how you brand and market the products, and if you can continue telling stories around the products, it's really what elevates your brand and things that you sell to a higher level, right? Now, of course, it's not important necessarily for all consumers. I think. I mean, there's certainly and maybe that's not also what we need. Like Lacàph is not something that really wants to speak to every consumer. Mm-hmm. We're a little bit more intellectual to our product the development and to our approach. We're a brand that appeals to people who are really curious about the world that they're in, and ask questions. And it's not only about their coffee, but it's about the food that they eat in general, the clothes that they buy, the vacations they go on. They kind of decide based on sort of emotional and sort of the principles that they lead their life. And they find it important to know what where their products come from. Okay. And so so it's really storytelling is really a huge element. Like 50% of what we do is storytelling around the products that we create.
I see. So not just creating a space or creating a product for people to consume, but also kind of creating this meaningful experience of that product and of that space.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, I mean, where we sit right now, this is called Lacàph Coffee Experiences Space. We have people coming through here every day, and we have really talented coffee guides. We don't call them baristas, we call them coffee guides, and we call the people that visit coffee explorers, because they're coming here and they're sort of learning new things and learning new things that maybe they never tried before, and really sort of adding some additional meaning and hopefully creating memorable experiences for them that they can take home and share with people back home.
That's great.
Yeah.
So when people come to visit the space and go on one of these kind of explorations, then do you run into people who are experiencing Vietnamese coffee for the first time?
All the time, absolutely. So when you look at different cultures and brew methods, certainly Italy is Italian style has been popularized, and it's easy to forget or not realize, but even as recent as 20 years ago, Italian style coffee consumption was still very much in its infancy on a global scale.
Really?
Right? I mean, certainly in boutique cafes, but but it's really Starbucks and larger chains that really popularized the espresso, right? And before that, it was relatively simple. And some people hear about first wave and second wave and things like that. So although it does take time to popularize styles of drinking coffee, it's not like, we're not talking about hundreds of years, and I kind of believe that the Vietnamese very classic style, which is called Phin, Phin, that's a classic Vietnamese brew method. It's incredibly economical. It's the equipment is incredibly inexpensive compared to, let's say, an espresso machine for sure. And it's very simple. And, I think that, although it's not in the top 5 of brew methods globally at the moment, I see no reason why in like 10 years from now it shouldn't be in the top 5 or even top 3. It doesn't have to only be consumed with Vietnamese coffee. It can be with other filter style coffees. And I think that Vietnamese coffee in general has definitely experienced the very beginning of an incredible uptick in popularity. And you see brands in the U.S. Popularizing Vietnamese coffee there as well. We hope to take a really global approach as a brand. But I think that, a lot of people have never really tried Vietnamese coffee. But a lot of people, when they try, they really love it. And I think that trend will continue for quite a while.
That was exactly my experience. I was introduced by a Vietnamese friend, actually, who was running a Vietnamese food truck in Tokyo.
There you go.
Who offered traditional Vietnamese coffee in the metal filter. And I thought, this is totally different from any coffee I've ever had. I tried it and went, wow, this is delicious. I love this. Where can I get more? In my case, though, I found it was very difficult to find anything outside of, say, a Vietnamese restaurant where I could find Vietnamese coffee. Even ordering it online, there were limited availability. So why do you think it is that maybe Vietnamese coffee has yet to have this kind of global acceptance that other coffee cultures maybe already have?
Yeah, Italians are masters at marketing, I think. You have beautiful brands from, famous car brands to famous fashion brands and coffee brands as well, like Illy and Lavazza. Marketing only exists in Vietnam since the economic reforms in 1986.
Wow.
Right? So the economic reforms are called Doi Moi, and basically it happened in the year that I was born. So, 37 years now, it's not really that long to really master the art of marketing and communication. And Vietnam, I would say, only in the past decade really started putting out world-class brands. Before it was very much on the commodity side.
Okay.
Right. So going back to what I said before, I think anything without a story, whether it's a table or flowers or whatnot, without the story is basically a commodity. It's the story, when you really pull everything aside, it's the story what adds value and creates the brand over the long term. So but before Doi Moi, there was no need for storytelling. There was no need for brands at all, because the way things worked essentially was very much in the sort of the standard socialist communist model, which is people were allocated resources essentially equally, right? And so you don't need to convince anybody at that point to buy your rice or salt or olive oil or whatever oil rather. But the idea of developing robust brands is very new still, and while in Europe it's been going on for a very long time, in Vietnam it's new. And I think that it's a challenge that I think young Vietnamese entrepreneurs are doing a very good job at tackling, building these brands, and you can see slowly very high quality brands coming out of Vietnam, and I hope that will for sure accelerate and continue. But that goes, to answer your question, before there wasn't a lot of communication around it. And I think that, to be honest, for Vietnamese people, the Phin style brewing is so normal. Sometimes I feel like it's difficult for them to always appreciate how interesting and special it is. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the country to like have an impact on every kitchen around the world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And especially like for so many countries that have coffee as the part of their day every single day, it's like, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, there's just millions of people worldwide who without a doubt would say, yeah, I want to try that,
Sure.
but just haven't heard of it yet, haven't had the opportunity to experience it yet. So I feel like that's a wonderful like kind of gateway into, you know, learning more about another culture and also getting something that you can integrate into your life now. As
Absolutely. And that's exactly
love.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, right? Like we're trying to create a product that sort of makes that spark with consumers in the US, for instance, or Japan or Korea, and hopefully you know, makes them more curious and more interested in, you know, learning more about the country, maybe even visiting, and you know, and becoming more regular Vietnamese coffee consumer.
Right, right. And I also, of course, want to ask if you could explain, what is the name of your coffee brand? What Lacàph? What does it mean? How did you?
Yeah, you know, I don't think it's something that we need like in principle that when we chose the name Lacàph, it wasn't like we wanted to have a very deep meaning that really sort of defines their company. There were more practical reasons to choosing Lacàph, right? Like things like it's 2 syllables, it's easy for anybody to pronounce, whether you're Vietnamese, French, or American, even as simple as it was available as a .com. But at the end of the day, there is a sort of etymology behind it. So Lacà in Vietnamese is a term, it's kind of a slang term for sort of complete at ease and freedom to hang out and to take your time and be with friends and feel comfortable to sort of explore or not or whatever you want. So it's sort of this kind of very blanket term for sort of a moment that you have that you can kind of be comfortable and cafe is coffee. It's a and so we sort of made a mesh of these two. And the idea here is, you know, to be completely free to enjoy the coffee. So that's where it comes from.
Okay.
But you know, again, you know, I think for us, it was really like we liked the name. You know, it wasn't like because it means something that we should. We just like the name.
Yeah. And when I first saw the name, I thought vaguely kind of French feeling. Like I couldn't quite place what it was, and then learned about it and like, oh, that kind of makes sense that it's not quite here, not quite there sort of name, this kind of made up concept. But
right, yeah. I mean, you know, we you know, with our ambition, we obviously need to make a name that's trademarkable. You know, so if you choose strictly a name that is something from a dictionary, a combination of words from the dictionary, that becomes a lot more difficult. And so made up name is kind of makes that easier a little bit, and that part, and also being able to register it as you know, as URLs, and but yeah, absolutely, you know. So when Vietnamese people read that, very often they, I wonder if that means what I think it means, you know. And a lot of especially Westerners, will think that it's from French.
Yeah.
And we've had that quite often. And doesn't bother us too much. You know, I think that in marketing, it's sometimes good to be a little bit ambiguous because it makes people think about you more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Then I want to ask a couple more questions that are kind of related to kind of your expansion into other countries. We spoke briefly about the content, the multilingual content that you've been producing to do storytelling and to share kind of these connections that you have with farmers, for example. I also noticed that you had some content available in Korean on your YouTube channel. So what is kind of the thinking behind having multilingual educational resources available to people? Is that kind of a hint at the directions you're hoping to expand
for
to?
Sure. So in this case, you know, English and Vietnamese are sort of the given because, you know, we're in Vietnam and English is sort of the most accessible language, I would say, for at least our target audience. You know, universally, so to speak. The Korean was because we have a branch office there.
Okay.
So we have 2 people working in Seoul who represent the company. And so Korea, although we also distribute now to Macau and Hong Kong and and we're in talks for Japan and several different countries, Philippines, Indonesia. Korea is sort of the market that we're testing a lot of things and seeing how we can best sort of grow for other Asia Pacific markets. And so we hope to create more and more multilingual content and become better at that in the future. But certainly we want to make, for example, again, the focus is a little bit on Korea because of our relationship with Korea and our office there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're hiring now coffee guides with fluent Korean speaking abilities because Korea is also the number one foreign visitor to Ho Chi Minh City.
Okay.
I just got the numbers for last quarter. Last quarter, it was number one, and already half as many Korean visitors visited in the first quarter as the entire of last year.
Wow.
So it was like I think about 125,000 visited last quarter and 250,000 visited the entire last year. So that's because of COVID, obviously,
right.
But there's a huge, not only is it number one, but we can expect probably around 700,000 Korean visitors to Ho Chi Minh City this year.
Wow.
And so we've decided that that's our strategic sort of first step, let's say, and also our personal direct involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of seeing how we go that way. For instance, in Japan, we want to work with a distributor, maybe still supported out of the office in Seoul, but we can also consider, maybe having just one representative, for instance, per country. And then we want to reach out to Japanese. We want to reach out to, Hong Kong. Hong Kong, we already have distribution. And for us, that's sort of low-hanging fruit. We have Asia Pacific countries. Many people have visited Vietnam before, so they do have a little bit of a sense of what Vietnam is. And then once we have a better foothold in those countries, we're going to be looking more to the U.S. and to Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, making native language content for these markets is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think YouTube is I love YouTube personally. I think it's such a great web, social media platform. And they actually have the option, right, to add subtitles per language.
Yes.
Which is something that we are not doing at the moment, but we will eventually do, especially if we have sort of the setup in a way that it becomes easier for us. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely love YouTube.
Yeah.
For so many different reasons.
Yeah.
Such a great tool. Absolutely. Yeah. As we kind of get to the latter half of our discussion, then I want to ask a couple of kind of more broad questions about you and your experiences then. So I've just kind of broadly, you've spent a long time in Vietnam. How would you say that your time here has kind of influenced how you've developed and how you've kind of changed, maybe from when you first arrived to the person that you are today? Have you noticed?
Yeah, I was a very different person when I arrived because I was only 22 years old and I had, although I had some jobs in university, part-time jobs, sometimes people ask me, oh, what's the working culture difference? And I have to be honest, I don't know, because I haven't really spent much time working in other, in European work environments or in American work environments. So I can guess, but I'm certainly a very different person. And Vietnam is certainly a different country than it was 17 years ago. Or 16 years ago, when I first arrived, there were a lot less cars, there were a lot less bridges, there were a lot less tall buildings. Vietnam I think the GDP per capita, or at least the GDP overall, was maybe a third or so of what it is today. Yeah, so it's growing very fast. One thing that hasn't changed is the sort of the energy for opportunity. That hasn't changed. That's one of the differences, certainly, that I personally feel between here and Europe, or at least Holland, where I'm from. I love Holland, and certainly also being here so long has made me appreciate Holland more when I'm there. Wow, Amsterdam's actually really beautiful where I'm from. And when you live there, you don't really realize that. You take it for granted. And now when I'm back, I'm always like, wow. But yeah, there's so much to do still here, right? if you want to create, I mean, you certainly can create coffee company in Holland. There's, it's not like you can't do that, but
Right.
but you can really build something interesting here, and it's not going to cost you a lot of money out of the gate. You can even with $10,000-$20,000 make interesting ideas, at least the basics, and hire some people and try to start your business. In Holland, I don't think you can do very much with 10 to 20,000 euro.
I see.
And so that energy is still here. I think that there are a lot more people, there are a lot more cars, there are a lot more tall buildings, there are a lot more companies here, but the energy remains, and I think that that's going to remain for quite a while still, because there's still so much ahead of us in Vietnam, and a lot to do, a lot that has that still is waiting for somebody to come and do it.
Great. Then maybe the flip side of this question then, what do you find challenging about working here?
Yeah, I think that I read one of your other questions and sort of like what kind of advice or something like that would, and it maybe connected a little bit, because I think I used to not appreciate experience as much as I do today. And and the reason why before, and I still appreciate this reasoning to some extent, is because experience can also limit your creativity sometimes, because you're sort of used to doing it this way and you've been told this is the best way. And so sometimes you kind of like limit yourself, or kind of think this is the only way, and you do see that a lot, right? People who work in industry, for a specific industry for a long time, have difficulty doing it new way, even if the original way or the way that they're doing not always maybe makes sense. Sometimes it's good to just, even though everybody's doing it, doesn't mean it makes sense, right? So, I think that the challenge is, that Vietnam is still a super young country, and it doesn't have a lot of experience.
I see. So people have kind of it's been done a certain way for an extended period of time, perhaps, but now there's a period of opportunity and kind of growth, and so kind of moving.
It's a bit of both. There's certainly people who are used to doing it a certain way for a long time, but there's also a lot of young people who just haven't done it very long. Haven't done marketing very long, haven't done accounting very long, whatever it is. So the country is still, I think, I don't think anybody would argue, right, that the country still has a lot of experience to make up for, so to speak, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a magnet for foreigners, so to speak, to come and do it, and hopefully not forever, right? I sometimes think, I'd like to not, always do this. I'd love it if in 7-10 years or so, a Vietnamese CEO can come over and take my place, actually, right? Okay. But and not to say that I am super experienced either, but certainly, finding experienced talent is not easy. And I appreciate experience way more than I used to. I used to be like, it doesn't matter if you're not experienced as long as you have the energy. That's true, but experience also helps a lot in understanding how you make decision-making process, organizational systems, planning, all this sort of stuff. Experience is also useful.
So when you say experience in this case, then you're not just talking about, say, building a brand or running a business necessarily, but also someone who has experience maybe navigating the intricacies of the local environment.
Yeah. And so I was very ambitious before, in the sense that I really thought, okay, we're just going to get a young group of people and we're going to learn together and things like that. But that's tough too. And it does that, as you grow and as your company expands, getting people with a lot of real world experience in certain key positions is definitely useful. But yeah, Vietnam is a young country, and I mean that not in the sense of the age of the country itself, but the demographics. It's very young, and we're all learning together. Yeah.
Great. I want to finish just with a couple more broad questions then. First is just about your kind of inspirations as you're leading Lacàph. Is there any brand or any organization or individual that really inspires you, or you think, I'd really love to collaborate with that organization?
Yeah. I mean, I think that Maru chocolate, which is a brand that was launched, I think, 11 years ago or so in Vietnam, Yeah, so Vincent and Sam, they were really, in my opinion, one of the first to build a Vietnamese high quality food brand, right? And that's the key difference. Like I said, in the past, even on the chocolate side, chocolate was exported, and other countries, other brands, non-Vietnamese brands would buy that and process it and package it, market and sell it. And that's where most of the value capture is, right? In that latter side of the supply chain. And that's, in my opinion, super unfortunate. Just to illustrate, Vietnam is number 2 in the world in coffee growing in volume, right? In production volume.
Mm-hmm.
But it's number 11 in the world in value, in coffee value. And why is that? It's because most of the production is exported again, it's sort of commodity, lowest sort of value part of the supply chain, and then imported into, the US, Japan, Switzerland is a big one, and then processed and packaged and marketed and sold to the consumers from that point on, mm-hmm. right? So one of our real goals is to try to make a change into that slowly. Like, I don't expect that Vietnam will be in 2 years from now number 4 or anything like that, but I'd love to be in the top 10, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I hope that Collective, which is the Lacàph parent company, can play an important role in that, where we can slowly start creating high value products that are exported as a branded product rather than as a commodity.
I see.
I think that, Vincent and Sam with Maru were really the ones that showed many people that it's possible, that it's possible to do it at a super high quality of execution. Mm-hmm. And I really admire them for that, and you see other brands coming out. It's a little bit different, but I'm very admire Pizza 4P, which is a sort of a pizza, Japanese influenced pizza restaurant. They did an excellent job. What I admire a lot about them is they're very good at data. So they really, and that's something that I think we can learn a lot from, like how to capture and how to analyze, capture in a useful way and then analyze data, mm-hmm. and make decisions, at least partially with that data. I think it's also important to not always listen to data, because then you sort of get a very average picture.
You might lose kind of the human aspect.
Yeah. If you only listen to data as a pizza company, you probably only need a margarita and a pepperoni pizza, right? But in any case. So certainly these brands that are being built out of Vietnam, you have Mott Shoes, it's a shoe brand. Even a little bit more old school brands like Bitis is another shoe brand. I think is pretty cool. And you have a lot of young entrepreneurs. I saw a jeans brand called, I think, Red Onion or something like that. Looks really cool. So there's a lot of young entrepreneurs that are really starting to build out their dreams and building quality execution on the brand side, because that's so important, and it's what really creates the moat around you and your competitors in terms of it's not rocket science, let's say, to make a coffee or a jean, right? And you can probably replicate the quality pretty easily, let's say. But if you really want to make a moat, you need to create the brand and the story around it, and that's much more difficult to copy.
Right. So those brands that you mentioned are kind of doing a really good job at making those stories and creating those experiences for people and pushing kind of these higher quality experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maru went even further, right? And a lot of the things that we do are certainly, that they do inspired us. So like working directly with farmers, helping them improve their quality so that they can improve their lives, the grittiness of it all. I really appreciate that. So I think out of all, Maru is certainly one of our big inspirations as a company. We're very different as well. I mean, they're making an occasional product mostly, right? And we're making a really daily product. But so there's some, strategic differences that you need to account for, but like working with farmers, working with their stories, it's really core to what we do as well.
Great.
I like them. Yep.
Great. All right. Just a couple more questions then, hopefully easy ones. I want to you've mentioned it a couple times now that you came to Vietnam when you were about 22, I think.
Yep.
What was the reason for Vietnam?
Yeah, so I traveled here. So, I'm Dutch, but I spent 10 years in the U.S. and I traveled. And so I knew sort of North America and Europe pretty well, but I'd never been to Asia. And so I think it was in end of year 2, of university. You get long summer holidays in university. So I spent, I think, 8 weeks in this region. And out of all the countries that I visited, Vietnam spoke to me the most because of this sort of grittiness and energy. It had this nice balance between sort of like, let's get things done attitude, as well as not like too impersonal, you know? So it has that business aspect, but it's not like totally impersonal. And so I really appreciated that. And then I had a job offer an internship offer rather for Vietnam, in Vietnam, from somebody I knew through my university. And so I did that for half a year or so, and then I got another job. I was actually going to maybe potentially go to Japan to do a master's degree, but then I got another job offer, and then I kind of stuck, you know. And at some point you have such a wonderful network of friends and people around you and other entrepreneurs that you can like get advice from, and so. And you know, as you start investing and building other businesses. So at some point I realized this is my home now. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Then lastly, what's coming up next for Lacàph, or what do you hope that people check out next? Yeah,
so we have this Lacàph Space Saigon, and this is, we're not a cafe brand, we're a coffee brand. So we do have this space, but it's really for brand communication, education, storytelling, experiences, and things like that. And we wanted to replicate the Lacàph space into Da Nang and Hanoi. So that's what we're working on right now. And expanding our production facilities. So we built a roastery that only came online about a year and a half ago or something like that.
Wow.
And it's already kind of needing to be expanded. So we'll be working on that. And then I think the most sort of real new thing is we're contemplating a research and development coffee farm in Dak Nang province, which is about 6 hours drive from here. And so the farm is focused on Robusta, which is 95% or so of Vietnamese coffee crop. So you have two main coffee varietals, Robusta and Arabica. And Vietnam is primarily doing Robusta. Robusta doesn't have like a wonderful reputation internationally for quality, which is not, it's deserved for the reputation, but it's not for the right reasons, right? So it's deserved because most Robusta gets grown very, like, not with a lot of attention and care.
Okay.
And so, and it's because it's a very resilient crop, very resilient varietal, and so it gets often grown at very large scale for instant coffee and low quality coffee and things like that. And so a lot of people have this idea that Robusta equals not good coffee, which is not necessarily the case. If you do a very high quality execution on the growing and processing and things like that, you can make really wonderful coffee, like really delicious. And in fact, you know, a lot of people who complain about acidity in coffee, so they say it's sour, that's usually because it's very Arabica heavy and light roast. And so, so Robusta presents also with regard to climate change and things like that, because of its resiliency, a really great future. But, you know, at the moment, most of Vietnam's Robusta is grown again, you know, at relatively low quality standards. And so part of the R&D project is to work on know-how and methods and technologies that can help coffee farmers produce super high quality fine Robustas.
Oh, wow.
And that would be something for Lacàph, obviously, but even for export, you know, producing export, you know, fine Robustas for roasteries in Asia Pacific and beyond, because people are starting to really get a little bit of a mind, you know, changing their minds about Robusta. You know, we've done several pop-ups in Korea and Seoul, and we always sell out of our fine robustas there because people are becoming really curious. Arabica is kind of like a lot of people know about it already. It's kind of, it's already, I wouldn't say it's done, but it's certainly a lot more further, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to do something new, Robusta is something really interesting to look at.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a huge undertaking. But
Yep.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, big
for sure.
project. Yeah.
Then finally, where can people find you or Lacàph online to visit your stores,
Yeah.
find your products?
So for me, my name is pretty, I wouldn't say it's 100% unique, but I've never met somebody with my name. So my name is Timen, 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 like time with an N at the end. So if you go on like LinkedIn, you can probably find me there.
Okay.
And Instagram. And then for the company, Lacàph, Lacaph. Again, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. So it's pretty easy to find us, and obviously at lacaph.com, so
Great.
lacaph.com.
Great. So I'll make sure to put all those links in the relevant description so everybody can come and find you and find out what you're up to. Thank you so much for your time. If you have anything else that you are just burning to get out into the world, you can add it in here.
No, I really appreciate, I often remind our team, it's because of the people that visit us that we get to do what we love. And so we're always very grateful to have people who come in from other countries to visit. And, really, really happy about and very excited about the future of not only this company, but the Vietnamese coffee segment scene as a whole. And we really, hope that people visit us here and learn, because it's super fun and it's also really delicious.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I
you,
really
Alicia.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.